Our voices are echoing. The highest mountain in North Africa is in Morocco, and these mountains are home to the Amazigh people, one of North Africa's oldest indigenous cultures. They have their own language, their own writing system, and traditions that predate the modern Moroccan states. Some villages are built directly into these mountains, where people have historically farmed, raised livestock, and depended heavily on the land around them. So, I left Marrakech to see what life actually looks like up there, and this was the first thing I saw. We booked a day trip from Marrakech to explore the Ourika Valley and the Atlas Mountain. Our tour company picked us up from our apartment and we headed out of the city. Now, I was already excited because I had been to Ukraine earlier on this trip and I had experienced snow there. So, naturally, I had started expecting to see snow in some places in Morocco. And when I finally caught the first proper glimpse of the Atlas Mountains, I was not disappointed. But before we got into the mountains, we had one interesting stop to make. Our first stop was an Argan oil cooperative. If you've spent any amount of time in Morocco, you've probably seen Argan oil everywhere. It's used for cooking, skincare, hair products, and cosmetics. And Morocco is particularly famous for it. But standing inside this cooperative, I realized that there was another story behind the little bottles of oil tourists take home. The women working here were selling and demonstrating the products, and our guide explained that some of the women had come from difficult circumstances, including difficult marriages. For women in rural communities, having a place where they could earn their own income can make a huge difference. And I think that's what made the stop more interesting to me, because instead of just seeing an argan oil as another Moroccan souvenir, I was seeing the people behind the products. We got to try some of it too. They served us bread with argan oil, and we tried the argan butter with bread, along with some Moroccan tea. And honestly, after tasting everything, I started understanding why people are obsessed with this stuff. Although, I almost bought one of the products there. I was actually looking at an aphrodisiac, but I changed my mind. After leaving the cooperative, we continued to the Ourika Valley, and then everything changed. The landscape opened up, the mountains became bigger, the valley became greener, and suddenly, behind us were these enormous snow-capped peaks. I remember looking around and thinking, oh my god, Morocco is so beautiful. Because this wasn't the Morocco I had seen in Marrakech, Fez, or Agafe. It felt softer, quieter, and honestly, it looked like somewhere I had dreamed about. Okay, so guys, we are at Ourika Valley. This place is so beautiful, where you can like have breakfast, lunch by the river. So beautiful. The Ourika Valley is one of those places that completely changes your idea of what Morocco looks like. You can go from the busy streets of Marrakech to this peaceful mountain landscape in the same day. And that contrast was probably my favorite thing about it. Eventually, it was time to hike through the Atlas Mountains to see the waterfalls in Setti Fatma. Setti Fatma is one of the best known areas of the Ourika Valley and the starting point of hikes towards its waterfalls. We met our local guide and started making our way up. Yeah, it is too cold. I mean, well, so it's in the news that there would be storm and it would be super cold today. So it's been super windy. It's snowing up there. And I mean, it's super and really cold. And before coming here, I had honestly imagined that the hike was going to be much harder than it actually was. It wasn't easy. There were rocky parts, steep sections, and quite a few people making their way up at the same time. But I wasn't struggling the way I thought I would. And one thing that surprised me was how much life there was along the route. This is a natural fridge. They use it to cool everything. There were little shops and restaurants tucked into the mountains. People were selling things, tourists were walking up and down, and somehow, all of this existed in the middle of this incredible landscape. It felt like the mountains weren't just somewhere people came to look at. They were actually part of everyday life. After almost an hour of walking, look at where we're coming from, and look at where we are right now. And we're still going to the top. Can you see? This is like the most adventurous thing I've done on this trip. Whew. We finally reached the waterfall. And I am going to be honest with you. It was nice, but it wasn't exactly Niagara Falls. I had built it up in my head. So when I finally got there, I was like, oh, okay. It wasn't bad at all. It was actually worth the hike though. But I think what made the experience special wasn't necessarily the size of the waterfall. It was everything around it. The mountains, the people, the little restaurants, the sound of water, and the fact that we had actually walked through the mountains together. The only problem was, it was absolutely freezing. This was January, so although it would have been amazing to actually get into the water, there was absolutely no chance I was voluntarily putting my body inside that water. Too chilled. After the hike, we made our way back down and stopped for lunch beside the river. And this was probably my favorite moment of the entire day. The restaurant was literally beside the water. You could sit there and watch the river flowing right next to you. It was peaceful, it was beautiful, and after spending the day walking around, I was honestly just happy to sit down. We had chips and grilled food, but I am not going to lie, the food wasn't really the highlight. But somehow, I didn't even care, because sitting there beside the river with the mountains around me, I felt genuinely at peace. And that was something I didn't expect. I had already spent quite a bit of time exploring Morocco by this time. I had seen ancient cities, I had walked through medinas, I had experienced the desert, I had seen snow in Ifrain, but Ourika gave me something completely different. It showed me a slower side of Morocco, a quieter side, a side where the mountains aren't just a beautiful backdrop for tourists. They are home, they are where people work, where communities have built their lives, where Amazigh culture continues to exist, and where for one afternoon, I could sit beside a river and completely forget about the noise of everything else. And honestly, this became my favorite part of Morocco. Not because the waterfall was the biggest, not because the food was the best, and definitely not because the hike was easy. It was because of how I felt there. Peaceful, present, and completely surrounded by nature. And if you are visiting Marrakech and you are looking for something beyond the souks, the medinas, and the deserts, I genuinely think you should make your way into the Atlas Mountains, because sometimes the best part of traveling isn't seeing the most famous thing, it's discovering a side of a country you didn't even know existed. For me, that was Ourika. If you ever find yourself in Morocco, don't just stay in the places everyone tells you to visit. Come out here. And if you want to see where I go next, subscribe and come with me. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone that needs to see it. And I'll see you in the next one.